I'm Wolf Blitzer in Washington, along with Caitlin Collins, and this is America's Choice, Election Day in America, your headquarters for all the crucial races and issues driving voters to the polls today. Key contests are being decided right now in Virginia, Mississippi, Kentucky, and Ohio.
The first polls close in just hours from now, and these races could help us get a sense of where the voters are ahead of next year's presidential election. We're going to see if abortion rights will continue to be the driving force that it so clearly was in last year's elections after the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. Abortion access is directly on the ballot in Ohio tonight, where voters are deciding whether to enshrine the right to one into the state's constitution.
We're also certainly closely monitoring competitive governor's contests in Kentucky and Mississippi, both deeply red or Republican states, along with the high-stakes struggle for control of the government of Virginia, where all 140 seats in both the House and the Senate there are up for grabs.
We have live team coverage of it all. Jessica Dean is in Richmond, Virginia, but we start tonight with Kyung Law in Columbus, Ohio. Kyung, obviously you are in the most populated county in the state. That's Franklin County, Ohio. What have voters been saying as they've been casting their ballots today?
Well, what you're hearing and what you're seeing here, at least in this one polling place, and you're right, Caitlin, this is a populated county. There are a lot of people coming to this particular polling place. So this is just one snapshot of one place. But I want you to take a look at what we're not just hearing but seeing. You can see the number of people. This is an off-year election at a polling place. This is known as a busier place. They didn't expect it to be this busy, and this is the sort of traffic that they've seen throughout the day. People checking in, getting their ballots here at this table, and then heading over to the voting booths to cast their ballot. What is motivating people here? What they are telling us is that it is issue one. It is deeply personal, that they have decided to make the time because they are fueled by it and they want to make their voice heard. But when you also ask them about what is motivating them to come out, they also understand that Ohio is poised to make a real statement leading into 2024. I want you to listen to a couple of voters we spoke with.
That's a big thing that directly affects people's lives, and they want to come out and give their opinion on how it should, how the laws should be in Ohio.
This election in Ohio is going to really set the tone for the rest of the country. I'm hopeful. I'm really hopeful.
Now, both of those voters decided to vote in support of issue one, in enshrining those rights in the state constitution. But that's not the case across this state. What we are hearing from both sides of issue one is they believe that this will be a battle up until the very end when polls close at 7:30. They still have people knocking on doors, Caitlin and Wolf. They think it is going to be very close. Wolf, Caitlin?
Yeah, we'll be watching closely. Kyung Law, thank you.
Let's head over to Richmond, Virginia right now. That's where the Republican governor, Glenn Youngkin, is hoping to gain full control of the state legislature. Jessica Dean is on the scene for us. So we're following, 140 races. What are you looking for, Jessica?
Well, Wolf, just to remind everybody out there watching, the Republican governor here, Glenn Youngkin, is not on the ballot himself. He's in the middle of his term. But it's a bit of a proxy battle because he is asking Virginians to give him full Republican control of the state legislature. Up until now, Democrats have been in control of the Senate here, and Republicans have been in control of the House. And so he is going around, he has been all over the state in the closing days, really making the case, asking Virginians to give him that full control so he can enact his agenda further. One key issue, abortion. Governor Youngkin had pushed for and offered up a 15-week abortion ban. Worth noting, Virginia is the only southern state that has not seen further restrictions on abortion since Roe versus Wade was overturned. That's because the Democrats in the Senate stopped that from happening. So you can see how this is a key issue that is being played out in all of these races all across this state. And Youngkin saying that he believes that this is really that a 15-week 15-week ban is a bit of a compromise. It's not as far as a 6-week ban that we've seen in places like Florida and Iowa. And of course, Democrats have leaned heavily into the messaging, saying that those rights should not be curbed at all. So we are seeing that certainly play out. And it also speaks to Youngkin as an individual, as a governor. What will this mean for him if he's able to really push forward his brand of Republican politics? He's certainly a conservative, but he's not necessarily a MAGA Republican. And so there are some things we're looking for in that regard as well, to see just how well he can do. And one more thing to keep in mind here in Virginia, a reason that we all watch in politics what happens in Virginia in these off-year elections is because often what happens in these off-year elections correlates with what we see the following year in these federal elections. So in 2019, the Democrats flipped the House, they flipped the Senate, then we saw Biden win the state by 10 points. In 2021, the Republicans took back the House, and then of course in 2022, we saw Republicans on Capitol Hill take back the House as well. So that's, again, why we like to keep our eye on what happens here in Virginia.
Very important. Jessica Dean in Richmond, Virginia for us. We'll be getting back to you early and often. Thank you very, very much. Caitlin.
And Gloria Borgia, I mean, as we look at this, Virginia is the only southern state without an abortion ban in place. And if Glenn Youngkin is successful in Republicans keeping the House, taking control of the Senate, it's the first time the governor would have control of everything in, I think, a decade.
And it also sort of catapults him as even more of a national figure than he already is. If he's able to do that, it would be quite a feat. The interesting thing to me about watching this Virginia race is the way the language has changed on abortion. Now, Karen is shaking her head yes, because now Republicans are no longer talking about a ban on abortion, because that's a bad word. The word now is limiting abortion. And what Youngkin is saying around the state is, look, the people who say we want to ban abortion are lying to you. We don't want to ban abortion. We want to limit abortion in a sensible way, and we'll see if he's making any headway with that.
It's a very
important.
All
right, let's listen to the governor right now. The Virginia governor, Glenn Youngkin, has used abortion to try to motivate voters to turn out for Republicans in the General Assembly in Virginia. Listen and watch this.
We've been completely straightforward and clear. I will back a bill to protect life at 15 weeks. This is a choice between no limits and reasonable limits.
So what do you think? How's that argument going to go?
You know, most voters still see 15 weeks as a ban. That's what the polling is showing, because the conversation has really shifted, particularly post the fall of Roe v. Wade, to where people say a woman and her doctor should make the decision. Every woman has a different healthcare situation. So when you put a sort of blanket ban, whether it's 15 weeks or 6 weeks or however many weeks, that starts to make people nervous. I think it also makes people nervous in Virginia because with a Republican governor and a full Republican legislature, what else would they do? Is this a slippery slope? But Gloria is exactly right. The language matters. And actually in Ohio, there were a lot of back and forth battles about the actual language that is on the ballot, which is different than the actual language of what the amendment to the state constitution would say.
But I mean, I think the flow through between Ohio and Virginia is you're seeing Republicans try to adjust their strategy because they realize they have lost every single time since the overturning of Roe when an anti-abortion plank has been put forward to the voters of the state, even in deep red states. So now they're trying to say the Democrats' position is what's extreme.
Right.
They're trying to point it as maximalist. And look, I think Youngkin is trying to carve out this sort of middle lane. But it's totally disingenuous to say that a ban isn't a ban. Words have meaning.
Well, no, I disagree with that.
It's 15 weeks. That's reasonable to a lot of people. But it's still setting a ban with exceptions, importantly, in the case of
I actually think if Republicans had credibility on a 15-week ban thing, there's room there nationally, according to a lot of polls I've seen, for the last 10, 20 years that says that's sort of a happy compromise in the middle for a lot of Americans who don't like the extremes on either end.
Sure.
The problem I think that they've got is that, Tip O'Neill, may he rest in peace, was, the shelf life on the phrase all politics is local is over.
Yeah.
And so when you see Republicans in other states talking for complete and total ban and even sometimes talking about prosecuting women and all that, people are thinking about the national brands of these parties in these races. And so even though I think Youngkin is making a plausible and defensible pitch here, I don't think a lot of voters are hearing, oh, well, he's being reasonable. I can trust all the Republicans.
It's also, by the way, I mean, Youngkin is still framing this as a ban.
And the backdrop of this issue is that a right was taken away from women. And so it's women who are charged up to solidify, to codify that right in the states where they can. That's why they came out in Kansas and in Ohio earlier.
And Kentucky,
and in
by the way.
And in Kentucky. So to your point, it's a national issue, but it's against the backdrop of something that was taken away. And also, it's just worth reminding people, 80% of Americans favor some kind of abortion, yes, with restrictions or in some cases. 38% of Republicans do.
Right.
So this is just, while you see Duncan trying to make this little dance, it doesn't represent the
Given
national
how radioactive this issue has been for Republicans, and maybe we're going to learn tonight if it still is, or if Republicans have learned how to push back on the messaging on this, why is Youngkin pushing this?
Well, Youngkin, first of all, Youngkin does not speak for all Republicans. Youngkin is actually...
But in Virginia, why is he pushing it?
Well, I think what's really interesting, Caitlin, is we're going to see whether it actually motivates people, because I don't think a ban on abortion is going to motivate people to the polls in favor of Youngkin's platform. I think, if anything,
But that's part of the reason why he's not talking about it very much.
Correct.
Like
He's running on jobs. He's running on education. He's not running on this as much.
But here's the
But he
problem.
didn't run on
It's the
abortion
candidates. The candidates in the legislative races, they were talking about it. Democrats have been on offense on this issue. So I think Youngkin realized he better get ahead of it, because his candidates were saying ban. They were saying horrible things. And so I think he's trying to reclaim the narrative. I don't know that it's going to work.
Right. It was never part of his narrative at all when he ran for
Correct.
governor. It was talking about, you know,
Never
schools
not to talk
and
about
education. And so what he's trying to do is sort of find some middle ground here. You know, 15 weeks, which polls show that lots of folks would say was okay. But he's got a problem because it's definitional, right? Is it a ban? Is it a limit? What is it, right?
Well, I guess we'll see what
Is it a restriction?
the voters decide. I mean, they're going to the polls. It will be very interesting and revealing to see if it is something that drives them to the polls. We'll actually be joined, speaking of another state where abortion is going to be a key issue tonight. That's Ohio. We're going to speak to former Ohio Congressman Tim Ryan. He'll be with us in just a moment with his predictions on the vote in his state and why the Democrat is calling for President Biden to drop out of the 2024 race. That's next.
We're back with our special coverage of Election Day in America. Ohio is the 7th state where voters are weighing in directly on the issue of abortion since the U.S. Supreme Court struck down Roe v. Wade. Joining us now is the former Democratic congressman from Ohio, Tim Ryan. He also ran for president, by the way, back in 2020. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us. Let's begin with your state of Ohio. As you know, in all 6 states before Ohio, voters overwhelmingly upheld abortion rights for women. Do you expect that to happen once again tonight in your state of Ohio? And how will the results in Ohio impact the national conversation about abortion rights?
Well, I think we will win this in Ohio. I think the latest poll had it at about 57% for the amendment for issue 1. And I think that's probably going to hold. We have obviously almost all of the Democrats, I think half of independents, and even 4 in 10 Republicans who are pro-choice, moderate Republicans, are voting for the amendment. So I think it should pass, and I think it will send a signal that really America, nobody wants to get in a whole big conversation about abortion every single day of their lives, but they know it's an essential right that should be left to the woman, and that this is a country that respects freedom, and women are citizens of this country, and they deserve that freedom to make those very difficult decisions.
As you know, Congressman, Ohio has seen millions of dollars in ad money spent on this very controversial issue of abortion. Many of these ads are full of misinformation about this particular initiative. How concerned are you that voters may not necessarily know exactly what they're voting for?
Well, there's always a concern, but there have been ads on both sides. I think there's been a really good ground game in support of issue 1, a lot of door knocks and a lot of people out on the ground throughout the state. I think that'll win the day. You do worry people catch snippets of things about, parents and those kind of things, which has all been debunked clearly over the last few weeks and months. So I think it's going to pass. I think we'll be good. And, kudos to all the men and women in Ohio who've been running a very aggressive campaign on behalf of issue 1.
While I have you, Congressman, I want to get to another very sensitive issue. Yesterday, you told CNN's Casey Hunt that you don't think President Biden should run for re-election. Who do you think should be running on the Democratic side in this place?
Well, I don't have an answer for that one. And let me be very clear, Wolf, if it's Joe Biden against Donald Trump, I'll be 1,000% with Joe Biden. I think Trump is a threat to our democracy and a threat to our country. And you're seeing that every single day on the news and just yesterday in court. The guy would be vindictive. He would go after people. He would use the Attorney General's office. He would appoint attorneys general that would go after people, U.S. attorneys across the country. That's a very dangerous proposition. So I would be with President Biden 100% in that regard. I just believe that we need generational change in this country. People are so frustrated. And I think that the president's message on the economy of telling people that they're doing better than they're doing is not going to work. And I wish that would stop, because I'm on the ground in Ohio. I hear what people are saying. Bacon's more expensive. Gas is more expensive. Groceries are more expensive, rent's more expensive. So a lower growth is not helping matters. We need to focus on their concerns. And when you don't meet, and if you know this, when you don't meet people where they are emotionally, they stop thinking you're understanding the challenges that they're going through every single day. And that is a very, very high risk. And that's why Donald Trump, no matter the circumstances that he's in, if you're struggling out there, you're going to say, I was doing better in 2020 than I'm doing now. At least it really feels that way to me. And so the pitch needs to be, we understand you're struggling. We're reindustrializing the country. We're bringing chips back. We're bringing manufacturing back. It's not happening soon enough. And I'm going to bust my rear end to make sure that we get your families where they need to be. Not telling them they're doing better. Not quoting macroeconomic statistics. Stop with that. It's not going to work. And
let me repeat the question. Is there a specific
Trump back in the White House?
Is there a specific younger Democrat you're looking at right now to potentially challenge Biden for the nomination?
I wouldn't give you any name that anybody else hasn't talked about over the past few months. We've got a number of really talented governors. We've got, talented senators. You look at the number, I'm not sure it matters all that much, because if you look at the number against Trump of a generic Democrat, they win 55-45. And so I hope, and again, I love Joe Biden. I will support Joe Biden 100% if he's running against Donald Trump. No question about that. But what I'm saying is, I hope we can get a new generation of leadership. I think the country is ready to move on. We have to start healing. And that's the direction that we need to move in. And there's plenty of competent people. And I hope the Republicans elect someone who has the guts to take on Trump. The country's got to heal. We got to move on from this. And I think I represent the frustrations of millions of people in the country.
Former Democratic Congressman Tim Ryan of Ohio, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks. Well, appreciate it.
Karen Finney, what do you make?
I knew that was coming to me.
How did you know? But listening to him say, what the White House is doing in the Biden campaign, when they hear these concerns, they see them, and we'll be watching to see if they potentially have any kind of drag on races tonight, even though obviously Biden's not on the ballot. What did you make of what he said about how they're not doing enough to address that?
Look, I think you take polls seriously, but again, we have a year, so I don't think we have to have our hair on fire. That being said, clearly, because we've had a number of polls now that have said the same thing, the what, in terms of the data, the numbers, we need to understand why people feel that way. And that's where the campaign is. You heard me say this. That is where the messaging comes in. Why are people feeling that way? And why is the message not actually moving voters towards President Biden? Because clearly what they've been doing isn't working. I agree with the congressman on that. So there needs to be some kind of change up in terms of the messaging and also probably how we're reaching people.
Tim Ryan just explained how to do it, though, right? He just showed why he remains one of the best communicators of the Democratic Party. And really, he should be doing the message out of the White House. He said, stop talking about macroeconomics. Stop. There are a lot of good statistics that the Biden team can point to about how the economy has improved. But if people aren't feeling it in their own lives, you need to meet them where they live. And a lot of this is about inflation that is still hurting people. But he's making a case from the perspective of Northeast Ohio, saying talk about manufacturing, meet people where they are, talk to them like a human being. And that kind of common sense Democratic perspective from a red state is what Democrats need more of right now.
I think the fear is among Democrats that I talk to is that they're losing Democratic constituencies, and they have to figure out a way to get them back. They're not doing as well with minority voters.
Yeah, Biden's really down with
Younger voters are bleeding. They're going away.
Well, when the polls are like Gloria is talking about, my experience working in politics is that it's not change up the messaging, it's change up from the top. Okay, this is coming from the top. You can't communicate differently about Biden. You couldn't do it about George W. Bush after Katrina and Iraq, the Iraq War. The messaging isn't going to change.
Here's why
the formed opinions people have.
Yeah.
And
so here's why I disagree, having worked in campaigns over 30 years. There's something what we call the informed vote. So you poll, you ask the direct question. Then you say, did you know ABC? Then you ask again. That information tends to, what you see, what is going to move people either towards or against. I'm not saying, again, I think they clearly need to do something differently.
To do that, though.
But we're not going to have, Joe Biden's not going to drop out.
But it's
so we
the way they
accept
feel.
That reality.
It's the way they feel.
But he should.
They feel, you know, you talk about younger voters, which I've been looking at, and it's astonishing to me that they're just disappearing. And the reason is, they say, the main reason is the economy. They trust Donald Trump on the economy more than Joe Biden by 28 points.
That's one poll. And let's be clear, they also, though, care about reproductive rights. They care about climate change.
Yes.
And by the way, when we talk about the economy, it means very different things. For black voters, racism is the economy. Because if I'm dealing with racism, I'm not getting a raise. I'm not getting the job opportunities that I think I deserve. And you've heard black voters say their concern more hasn't been done. Similarly with women and reproductive rights. So understanding how they feel means not just one issue, how they feel about that issue and how they experience it.
But it should just tell you that none of the Democrats running are talking about supporting Joe Biden. They're not talking about how they're linked with Joe Biden. They realize that Joe Biden is a dead weight on them in these races, and that should tell you something about how what sets up for the 2024.
All right, we're going to just continue this conversation down the road, but right now there's more news we're following. Will the deep red state of Kentucky oust its Democratic governor? Will Elvis Presley's second cousin turn the governor's mansion in Mississippi blue? The state of both of those key races. We have details. That's coming up.
The new CNN Prime Time is where the truth shines, taking you to the heart of the story.
Let me get straight to the breaking news. You can hear some explosions here in the background over Gaza.
And breaking through the noise.
Do you think red flag laws are effective?
The day's biggest stories.
We're talking about a day unlike any in Washington.
The night's most essential reporting.
What do you feel in these communities when the cameras start to leave?
This is the new CNN Prime Time, weeknights starting at 7 on CNN.
What's yellow?
Oh, Schwann's Home Delivery has a new name. It's like a freezer full of happy.
Happy like this? Yeah!
More options, easier ordering. Now at yellow.com.
Meet Martha. Martha is 75 years old and has been on Medicare for 10 years now. But she's a bit cranky because she heard the 2024 Medicare Advantage plans are now available during the Medicare annual enrollment period, and she wants details.
I'm already on Medicare. Why should I call and check up on my Medicare plan?
Hi, Martha. Plans and benefits can change each and every year. That's why it's important to call to get your free 2024 Medicare benefits checkup.
I already have my Medicare card. I am not calling.
Martha, right now is the Medicare annual enrollment period. 2024 Medicare Advantage plans are now available, so everyone on Medicare can call to see if a Medicare Advantage plan may be better for you. You can even call to see if there are any changes to your current Medicare plan in the coming year.
They probably won't answer the phone.
Well, Martha, if you call 800-882-0987, a licensed insurance agent will speak with you and look up your plan options and see if there is a plan that will better fit your healthcare needs.
Why don't I get these automatically?
Martha, 2024 plans are now available, but you won't get a 2024 Medicare Advantage plan automatically.
I think I called before, so I'm not calling.
Martha, right now is the Medicare annual enrollment period. 2024 plans are now available, so now's the time to call. So everyone on Medicare should call now during the Medicare annual enrollment period and get your free Medicare benefits checkup today. Just call the toll-free number on your screen. It's free.
Free?
Yes, Martha. The call and no obligation Medicare benefits checkup is free. They can look up your plan options and let you know if you're eligible to enroll in a 2024 Medicare Advantage plan available in your zip code. Call now and we will see what plans may be best for you.
It's time for me to call and get my free, no obligation Medicare benefits review.
That's right, Martha. I should have just given you the toll-free number. It's on everyone's TV screen now. Call 800-882-0987. 800-882-0987.
You were diagnosed with thyroid eye disease a long time ago. And year after year, you weathered the storm and just lived with the damage that was left behind. But even after all this time, your thyroid eye disease could still change. Restoration is still possible. Learn how you could give your eyes a fresh start at tedhelp.com.
Living with metastatic breast cancer means I cherish my memories. But I don't just look back on them. I look forward to the chance to make new ones every day with Verzenio.
Verzenio is proven to help you live significantly longer when taken with fulvestrant. Verzenio plus fulvestrant is for HR-positive, HER2-negative metastatic breast cancer that has progressed after hormone therapy. Diarrhea is common, may be severe, or cause dehydration or infection. At the first sign, call your doctor, start an antidiarrheal, and drink fluids. Before taking Verzenio, tell your doctor about any fever, chills, or other signs of infection. Verzenio may cause low white blood cell counts, which may cause serious infection that can lead to death. Life-threatening lung inflammation can occur. Tell your doctor about any new or worsening trouble breathing, cough, or chest pain. Serious liver problems can happen. Symptoms include fatigue, appetite loss, stomach pain, and bleeding or bruising. Blood clots that can lead to death have occurred. Tell your doctor if you have pain or swelling in your arms or legs, shortness of breath, chest pain, and rapid breathing or heart rate, or if you are nursing, pregnant, or plan to be.
I'm making future memories every day with Verzenio.
Ask your doctor about everyday Verzenio.
Election Night in America. Special live coverage starts tonight at 6.
This election day, we are following two key governor's races with high stakes. In Kentucky, incumbent Democratic Governor Andy Beshear fighting to turn his race into a referendum on abortion rights against the Republican Attorney General in the state, Daniel Cameron. In Mississippi, incumbent Republican Governor Tate Reeves, deeply unpopular amid questions about his involvement in one of the biggest public fraud scandals to ever happen in the state's history. His Democratic challenger, Brandon Presley, of course, is related to Elvis. Much more to know about him. Diane Gallagher is standing by in Jackson, but first we are going to go to Eva McKend, who is live on the ground in Louisville. Eva, this is a race where we've really tried to see the Republican here try to kind of nationalize this race, while Governor Beshear has tried to keep it more tied to local issues happening in Kentucky.
He has, Caitlin, but we have seen abortion really become a potent issue even in this state. Governor Beshear has really elevated this conversation. We were at the polls this morning and we spoke to one woman and she said that was the key issue that she was voting on. She was concerned about the future of reproductive rights in this country. Beshear also has this searing ad that has played time and time again of a woman by the name of Hadley, who was a victim of sexual assault. Hadley also joining him on the campaign trail, and he uses her story as a way to basically call out Republicans who do not support exceptions for rape or incest. So this is something that has been heavily elevated here. If Governor Beshear is victorious tonight, we could see Democrats also try to use this same playbook. But still, Daniel Cameron, the Attorney General, is a serious competitor here. He has worked overtime to try to tie Governor Beshear to President Biden. Biden, of course, not popular here in Kentucky. Caitlin.
Yeah, a Democratic governor in a very red state. Eva McKend will continue to check back in with you. Thank you for that.
Right now, we want to go to Mississippi, where a governor's race hasn't been this competitive in over 20 years. CNN's Diane Gallagher is joining us right now from a canvas event for Brandon Presley, the Democratic challenger. Diane, why is this race all of a sudden so close?
I think the question right now for people in Mississippi is, can this state elect a Democrat as governor? I actually have Brandon Presley with me right now. Hi, how are you, sir? This is the Democratic candidate. This is your final event. You've crisscrossed the entire state. Everyone wants to know, can Mississippi actually elect a Democrat as governor?
I think that we're going to win tonight. I've been in all 82 counties. The energy in this race has been amazing. The fact that we have knocked on over 260,000 doors throughout the state, and we've got folks that are ready right behind me to go knock more doors this afternoon.
How do you convince Republicans, though, to vote for you? I know you've run on a populist message, but how do you convince them to go? I've been out at the polls, and a lot of people tell me even if they don't like Tate Reeves, they have a hard time voting for someone who isn't a Republican.
Yeah, we've been proud to get Republican support throughout this campaign. I think that this election is as much a referendum on saving our hospitals, ethics reform, and the fact that Tate Reeves is one of the most unpopular governors in America, and Mississippians know he's out of touch with them, and that I would be a governor that would be in touch with Mississippians and the issues in Mississippi. This campaign has never been about national politics. He's tried to make it that way. It's been about the issues in our state and how we can have a governor that will go to work to fix those.
Has it been difficult being attached to national politics, being attached to national Democrats running in this state for you?
Well, I think more than anything else, we've kept this centric to the state of Mississippi. This is about whether or not our hospitals are going to be open for the next 4 years. It's about whether or not we end the corruption of Tate Reeves, where we've had the largest public corruption scandal in state history under his leadership. And so it's not, this has not been about national politics. I've disagreed with the national party plenty throughout this campaign, and this has been more about Mississippi than anything else, and I think that's why we're going to win tonight.
And you've talked quite a bit about expanding Medicaid. Mississippi, one of the few remaining states that has failed to do so. Again, this populist message you're running on, I've talked to people who have said that it's the idea of cutting taxes. Is that what's going to, you believe, push you over the finish line in a very unexpected, I mean, this would be an upset here if you won.
Yeah, I think we're going to win. Look, I'm a populist. I've said clearly that I'm a populist from the beginning. The issues in Mississippi are not right and left. It's about those of us who have been pushed on the outside versus a hand-select little few led by Tate Reeves on the inside. That's why we're attracting support from traditional Republicans, independents, and, of course, from Democrats throughout the state, because this is a campaign for the people. I've said that I wanted to build a coalition of black Mississippians and white Mississippians and Republicans and Democrats to take back the governor's office for the people of the state, whether it be cutting the grocery tax, which we have the highest tax on food in America. Tate Reeves has done nothing about getting that tax taken off of our working people, and he's had 12 years to do it. And I think that that's a message that's resonated, and they realize I'm a fighter. Tate Reeves has been a very low-energy governor, and he doesn't have any guts and backbone. I'm willing to stand up and fight.
All right, thank you so much, Brandon Presley. I appreciate your time. You know, Wolf, look, sometimes you get the candidate right as they come in. I will point out he's tried to tie Tate Reeves to that welfare scandal where $77 million worth of welfare funds were misspent and instead funneled to the politically connected and celebrities. Many people watching me know that Brett Favre is counted as one of those defendants in that. Now, look, Tate Reeves was lieutenant governor at that time, not the governor at that time. He's never been accused or officially of anything involving that, though his name has come up. Reeves has said that he believes that he can get himself across the finish line, that Mississippi is a reliably Republican state.
We shall see. All right, Diane Gallagher in Jackson, Mississippi first. Thank you.
Karen Finney, even if you are Elvis's second cousin,
yes,
can you become the next Democratic governor of a state like Mississippi?
We'll see. I'll tell you one thing that's interesting. A Jim Crow era law was repealed, and that law has the impact, it was diluting the impact of the black vote. So actually, black voters will have a much bigger say this time. It'll be interesting to see if that will make up the difference.
To the point we were discussing before, what we didn't hear Brandon Presley say a lot is Joe Biden. And, you know, I'm with Joe Biden all the way, and look at what he did on that infrastructure bill for all of us, and look at what he did for all of us during the pandemic.
Well, also to the points we were talking about earlier, he's pro-life. He is not talking about abortion.
Yes,
right?
no,
I mean,
he's not talking about
John Bel
abortion.
Edwards.
He's running as a very conservative Democrat.
Yeah, and by the way, that's good and
Old-fashioned.
healthy for the country in terms of if we want to heal our divides. You need big tent parties again. And Democrats there need to be rural Democrats and red state Democrats. And what you heard from Brandon Presley right there was kind of a master class in how to communicate from that perspective. And we'll see if it works. 80% of the state legislative seats in Mississippi are uncontested. That's a separate kind of scandal. That may have an impact on turnout and ground game. But that kind of messaging, that, you know, and just Democrats need to find a way to realize you don't need an ideological litmus test and culture war issues to define every candidate in every region of the country. That's a loser, not a winner.
This is why I married my husband, the Aaron Sorkin West Wing version of Politico sort of good boy. 62% of Mississippi are registered Republicans. Not even 30% are Democrats. So while you can aspire to sort of the change you can believe in, the likelihood that Mississippi votes for a Republican, returns a Republican to government is just what's on
keep hope alive. First competitive race in 20 years.
Well, there is the Presley factor.
That's right.
Keep an eye on it. And also, of course, Kentucky is a much more competitive race. We'll check back there in a moment. Also, next, we are going to go to the ground in Israel. How the country is now marking a month. It's hard to believe it's already been that long since the October 7th attacks. A live update next.
In Israel today, a nation pausing to mark exactly 1 month since that horrific Hamas terror attack on October 7th. The scale of the assault is still almost hard to imagine. More than 1,400 Israelis killed, men, women, and children, and more than 240 taken hostage into Gaza. CNN's Ed Lavendera is joining us live. He's in Jerusalem today. Ed, it has to be an incredibly emotional day today.
It was, Wolf, to mark the 1-month anniversary of the October 7th attack. Hundreds gathered here at the Western Wall, one of the most holy sites in the world. They came to mourn the hostages and to plead for their release. Israelis gathered at the Western Wall Tuesday night to mark the 1-month passing of the October 7th attack, holding a mass prayer for the return of the hostages held in Gaza. One mother was surrounded by the families of other hostages as she pleaded for her son's return.
He was kidnapped, marched by gunpoint onto a Hamas pickup truck, and led into Gaza. And that was 32 days ago. The hostages have been underground in Gaza for 32 days! Bring them home now! Bring them home now!
It's a sign of unity in a country still coming to terms with a terrorist attack that has once again plunged the Middle East into war.
I think the country is in trauma. I think that we still don't get it, you know, it's beyond grasping. It's something that is non-human.
Every night, a group of volunteers gathers in Tel Aviv and in cities around the country, handing out yellow ribbons to show solidarity with the families of hostages.
I want the families to feel as if all the people are with them. They're not alone in their struggle, and we won't stop and we won't take off the ribbons until they are back here in Israel.
While the yellow ribbons are prominently waving in many places, there's an undercurrent of anger and political division simmering across the country. Much of it directed at senior Israeli government officials. A member of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's cabinet was shouted away from a hospital a few weeks ago as she tried to attack victims. Killing me. To cope with the tension and the anger in the aftermath of the October 7th attacks, Shalom Zarug turned his anger into a volunteer mission out of his Tel Aviv restaurant with a group called Naton Titen, which means giving to help others. For weeks, they've cooked and packaged meals for Israeli soldiers and the victims of the attacks who've been displaced from their homes. As you do all of this work, do you think about the day that there will be peace? Is peace even possible?
We're definitely looking forward for that. We pray every morning, afternoon, evening for the peace to come over us and all of Israel on the world.
And Wolf, the prayers tonight at the Western Wall here in Jerusalem were about national unity, focusing on the soldiers and the hostages. But this country also knows that in the months ahead, they will have to come to terms with the political division that divided them so intensely before October 7th. Wolf?
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of depression in Israel right now, as I can testify. I was with you just a few days ago. Ed, thank you very much. Ed Lavendera joining us from Jerusalem. With Israel now signaling its post-war plans for Gaza, the White House is warning against a reoccupation. We'll have details when we come back.
I'm Jim Sciutto in the Golan Heights, and this is CNN.
Israel's defense minister says Israeli troops are now fighting Hamas right in the heart of Gaza City and declaring today that after the war ends, Israel will, quote, retain complete freedom of action of the Gaza Strip.
And those comments come after we heard from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu talking about what the situation in Gaza could look like last night.
I think Israel will, for an indefinite period, will have the overall security responsibility, because we've seen what happens when we don't have it.
And joining us now is Barak Ravid. He's the Middle East expert, political reporter for Axios. Barak, thanks very much for coming in. Does Israel actually have a plan for what happens if, and it's a big if it destroys Hamas and takes control over all of the Gaza Strip? Does Israel have a plan for what it's going to do?
Well, the short answer is no. Okay, there's no plan. But the longer answer is that I think there are sort of principles that you can start to see. First principle is obviously that Hamas is not going to be in control of Gaza, not going to rule Gaza. And the second principle is what we heard from Netanyahu and from the Minister of Defense, that Israel will retain overall security responsibility for Gaza Strip. I don't think that means reoccupying Gaza forever, obviously not. But I think it is more what you see in the West Bank in recent years, and especially after the Second Intifada, meaning the IDF will keep some forces inside Gaza, not the numbers that we see right now, and will go on almost daily raids into Gaza to root out whatever is left of Hamas the day after.
Because remember, about a month or so ago, shortly after the Hamas attack on Israel, President Biden said it would be a big mistake for Israel to reoccupy Gaza.
Yeah, so I don't think it's going to be, Netanyahu met a few people several days ago. It was a closed meeting, and one of them asked him, are we gonna reoccupy Gaza in the sense of, rebuilding settlements? And Netanyahu didn't answer, but he did something like that, And I think that's his state of mind right now. He's not interested in, reoccupying Gaza. He's not interested in, rebuilding settlements there. That's not the plan. But the question is whether he's really in control of his government, because inside his government are, several people that have very strong views about, taking the clock back to before Israel pulled out of Gaza in 2005 and rebuilding settlements there, and that will be a whole different story.
Yeah, even though he claimed to me once that he's the ultimate decision maker in his cabinet, clearly that has shifted since what happened a month ago. I think the more pressing question for the White House, though, is there going to be a ceasefire or tactical pause or humanitarian pause, whatever they're calling it, each day of the week? Your reporting is that President Biden wants to see a 3-day pause, but that does not seem to be something Netanyahu publicly is prepared to accept.
Yes. So yesterday, President Biden called Netanyahu again. I think it was the 10th or 11th phone call. And he told him very clearly, listen, there's a proposal on the table. It includes a 3-day pause in the fighting. It includes Hamas releasing between 10 to 15 hostages. And it includes that during those 3 days, and the reason that Biden claimed those 3 days are needed is because Hamas claims it doesn't know exactly where all the hostages are. So it will use those 3 days in order to gather this information and give a full list of the names of the hostages that are right now in Gaza. Problem is that the Israeli side, and Netanyahu told this to Biden yesterday, he told him, listen, it's a trick. They're only interested in Israel stopping they don't trust Hamas, and they think that if after a 3-day ceasefire, nobody around the world will really support Israel if it resumes the fighting in Gaza.
Barak Ravid, great reporting as always. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
We have much more to come tonight. John King is here at the Magic Wall right after this. He's going to lay out the key stakes and the key races that we are watching this election day. Plus, our very first CNN exit polls are ahead.
I'm Wolf Blitzer in Washington, along with Caitlin Collins. And this is America's Choice, Election Day in America. Any moment now, we're expecting the very first exit polls in some of the key races we're closely watching. Right now, voters are deciding crucial contests and ballot measures across the country, including in Virginia, Mississippi, Kentucky, and Ohio.
Abortion rights is a big through line tonight in some of these key races, particularly in Ohio, where the issue is directly on the ballot, a constitutional amendment that would enshrine the rights to an abortion. There are also governor's races with high stakes that we are keeping a close eye on in Kentucky, also checking on Mississippi, both deep red states. In the state of Virginia, every legislator is up for re-election.
And it all comes just exactly 10 weeks before the first contest of this presidential primary season. We have team coverage. Eva McKend is joining us from Louisville, Kentucky. Kyung La is in Columbus, Ohio, and that's where we begin. Kyung, you're there with Ohioans united for reproductive rights, the watch party that's going on. What are you anticipating tonight?
Well, as they look ahead to what tonight is going to look like, what we are hearing from this pro-Issue 1 group is that they expect that the early returns will be favorable for them. The question will be, according to the spokesman, is, quote, where do we land? Here is what they are encouraged by. And I want to show you this video of a polling place that we've spent most of the day today. This is a Democratic stronghold. And it's images like this, where turnout has been strong in those Democratic quarters, that the pro-Issue 1 people, the groups that want this to pass, to have the abortion rights enshrined in the Constitution, they feel very encouraged that turnout strong, that enthusiasm is high, and that passions are high. When you talk to people about why they are coming out, they all, almost unilaterally, who we've spoken with, say that they are here because of Issue 1. With 2.5 hours left to vote, there are both sides. The pro and anti-Issue 1 forces say that they are out knocking on doors, that they believe it will be a race to the finish. And neither side, even though they are encouraged by the turnout, neither side is saying this is going to be a slam dunk. Wolf and Caitlin, they believe that it will be very close throughout the evening.
We shall see. Kyung La reporting for us. Thank you very much.
And the polls will close in parts of Kentucky in just under an hour. The key race that we are watching, Democratic incumbent Governor Andy Beshear going up against Republican candidate Attorney General for the state, Daniel Cameron. Eva McKend is watching this closely from Louisville tonight. Eva, obviously we have seen, what this race it could mean, what people are looking into it, not just for the state, but also there are questions of what it could mean for Democrats nationally, looking to how Governor Beshear has run this race, depending on how things go tonight for him.
Yes, absolutely, Caitlin. It's because he's adopted this strategy that really centers this idea of Team Kentucky. He has been over the pandemic, natural disasters, a number of tragedies in this state, and that allowed him to really stray away from partisanship and lead with this idea of Kentuckians first. And, when we were at the polls today speaking to voters, some of them said that that was something that really resonated with them because they are tired of the bitterness of our politics. But listen, Attorney General Daniel Cameron, the Republican in this contest, he really presents a threat to Governor Beshear. What we have seen is that the Trump endorsement matters in a state like this one, Trump winning Kentucky in 2020 by nearly 30 points. And the Attorney General has been able to campaign on that heavily, as well as really make this argument that he would be better suited to work with the Republican-controlled state legislature here, and that this state should have representation that reflects their conservative values, Caitlin.
Yeah, it's a race we're going to be watching very closely to see, what those voters decide. Do they keep a Democratic governor in that deep red state? Eva McKend, we'll check back in with you. Thank you.
John King is here with me over at the Magic Wall. He's going to be here all night long. It's going to be a long night. First of all, let's start off in Virginia. What are you looking for?
Is this like 2020 when Joe Biden won by 10 points? Is the turnout like that? Do voters, especially in the swing areas in the suburbs, is that how they're voting? Democratic, right? They're voting for the House of Delegates. They're voting for the state Senate. Legislative elections. So this is the county map. It's not the presidential map. But is it an electorate like that? Or is it more of an electorate like this, when Glenn Youngkin just narrowly won election as governor? Now, if you notice, I'm going to go through two areas here, around Richmond and up here in the D.C. suburbs, right? Let's go out here. Let's go to Loudoun County. There are a couple, including a very key state Senate race out here. Loudoun County stretches into Fauquier County, some House of Delegates races. Look at Youngkin, 44 to 55. So you say, wow, he got beat in the suburbs. But he only got beat there by 10 points, right? 11 points right there. If you go to the presidential race in 2020 and look at that, Donald Trump got trounced. So Glenn Youngkin thinks he has the formula to bring Republicans back, make them more competitive. Maybe not win the suburbs, Wolf, but be more competitive in places like Loudoun and in places like Henrico County down here just outside of Richmond. That's where the key legislative, whether it's the House of Delegates or the state Senate, most of the key races are in the suburban area where Youngkin ran a lot stronger. You see there, that's blowout, right? That's almost 30 points right there in the governor's race. If you come here back to 2021, excuse me, you come here, you see Youngkin still getting beat, but not by a bigger margin. You can win on the margins. Republican performance in the suburbs. Can Glenn Youngkin sell the suburbs on a 15-week abortion restriction, abortion ban, call it what you will? That's what he's campaigning on. He's trying to recreate the abortion debate. It will be decided in the suburbs.
Let's go to Ohio right now, because there's a pair of very big ballot initiatives that people are looking at, including a constitutional amendment on the issue of abortion.
Right, and again, the same issue, the suburbs. So here's a blank map. The votes will come in later tonight, right? So a couple areas to watch. Not just Cleveland and the suburbs, but look how I stretch this out up to Lake County. Come over here, Toledo in the suburbs, Columbus in the suburbs, Cincinnati in the suburbs. Now, why do I do that? I want to come back to the 2020 presidential map, right? This is a red state. This is a state Donald Trump won quite comfortably. See Cleveland up here, but look up here. Not just Cleveland and the suburbs around. And again, the abortion issue, if you look at Kansas, a red state. If you look at Michigan, a blue to a purple state. When they had initiatives after the Dobbs decision, it was suburban voters, including a lot of Republicans, who said, no, the Supreme Court went too far on abortion. Do the voters in a place like Lake County go that far? Let me take this off and bring this out. This is a county, look, Donald Trump, lopsided, right? It's the suburbs, more affluent suburbs outside of Cleveland. What does this look like tonight on the abortion question? Again, you urban areas, the abortion rights forces need big turnout in Democratic strongholds, but they also need to make inroads in more traditional Republican areas, suburbs, more ex-urban areas out here. That's what we'll be looking for.
In Kentucky right now, let's take a look at Kentucky. The governor, Andy Beshear, he's got a tough race. What do you see?
So, again, sound like a broken record, but close elections in America are decided in the suburbs. And if you look here, and you look out here, right? Let's go back. This is Daniel Cameron running. Let's look here, right? You go back to the presidential race here in 2020. You see, that's Donald Trump country, right? Even the Cincinnati suburbs, right? This is a big red state. Donald Trump won by such a lopsided margin. But here and here. Now look at Governor Beshear's win in 2019. You go back to this race here. You see this? Look at this. Andy Beshear won the suburbs south of Cincinnati. Northern Kentucky, the Cincinnati suburbs, Andy Beshear won. Out here, he won. Again, look at the blue in this map when Andy Beshear ran 4 years ago. Look how different it is when Donald Trump went. Andy Beshear, a more moderate Democrat, is competitive, more competitive in the suburbs than other Democrats, certainly more competitive than Joe Biden was, Wolf. And that is the question tonight. Is this a presidential electorate? Can he go back? Can Andy Beshear recreate his 2019 map, which was favorable to him, or does it look more like a presidential map? If it looks more like a presidential map, then you will see Mr. Cameron as the next governor of Kentucky.
John King, at the Magic Wall, it's going to be a long night for you. We'll stay in very close touch. Meanwhile, the very first exit polls are just coming into CNN right now. CNN's political director, David Chalian, is joining us right now. He has brand new numbers for us. So far, what are they telling us, David?
Yeah, these are preliminary exit polls, Wolf, out of Ohio. And just remember, this is a survey of voters who voted today, as well as voters who voted before Election Day, whether they voted early in person or by mail. All the voters are represented here. And in these early numbers, look at this. We asked, should abortion be legal in all or most cases or illegal in all or most cases? And if you add up the 29% that say legal in all cases and the 33% of Ohio voters who say it should be legal in most cases, you see you are well over a majority of Ohio voters today say that abortion should be legal in all or most cases. We also asked about feelings about the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade. Look here. 18% of Ohio voters today say they're enthusiastic about the overturn, 17% satisfied, 21% dissatisfied. 39% of voters in Ohio today, Wolf, say they're angry about Roe v. Wade being overturned. You see where the passion is on this issue. And that's among all voters. Look at it among female voters in Ohio today, and that anger number goes up to 45% of female voters in this Ohio election today are angry about the overturning of Roe v. Wade. We also asked, who do you trust to handle more? Which party do you trust to handle the issue of abortion? 49% say the Democratic Party, 42% say the Republican Party. These numbers look like the kind of numbers that the pro-abortion rights movement, those looking to get Issue 1 passed in Ohio and enshrine abortion rights into the Constitution, these are the numbers they've been looking for and believe they're more likely on course for that than not. But these are early numbers, and we'll see when the votes get counted and they come in.
We certainly will. These are the first exit polls. There's going to be several more. David Chalian, thank you very, very much.
And David makes a good point, Wolf. Obviously, you know, these are early numbers. We'll wait to see what the numbers actually look like once the polls do close. But Margaret, when you look at this and that third number that David showed there, feelings about SCOTUS, about the Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade, this was asked to female voters. And the number for the percentage that feels angry is still at 45%. It was at 48% in 2022. Clearly, that number has not changed much.
And then if you add the dissatisfied, you get 65%, right? This is the majority, like a strong majority of people. By the way, if you also add all of the cases and all of the people who believe abortion should be legal, at least in some cases, it's 85% of the exit polling results. So not only has opinion not changed, it has remained robust in the column of women having the ability to choose their health care, whether to have an abortion or not. That is, you know, the messaging is just so clear. And the reflection as a Republican is that Republicans have not figured out how or why they are getting beat on this issue. They just haven't figured it out. So I look forward to seeing just exactly how that shows up in the polls.
Well, they haven't been able to move the needle from 2022. And, you know, the question we always ask in politics is, will this issue, will people feel as strongly about it a year from now as they did a year ago, or will it fade? And looking at our numbers in 2022, you know, people were angry 39% now, but 37% in 2022. Same thing. So it has not faded. And you're right, Republicans haven't figured out how to get their arms around this and turn this case around for them, but maybe they can't. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think if these numbers are accurate, I'm pretty skeptical about early exit polls.
Yeah, as you should be. It's just an early
exactly.
Can't imagine why,
I
Jonah.
mean, I have reflexive burn reactions to them because I've been so scarred by them. But if these are actually reflective of where the actual final electorate is on this, this is a huge win for the pro-abortion rights crowd. I don't think there's any way you can interpret that otherwise. At the same time, first of all, again, I'm skeptical about all that. I do think that the thing that the Republicans are struggling with is that they did not have a post-Roe plan at all. And for most of our political lives, abortion was a better issue for Republicans for turning out voters and a better issue for Democrats for raising money. That now appears to have flipped. And Republicans do not have a plan on the ground for how to deal with it.
Even though they worked for decades to get what happened achieved, to get that.
It's often very shocking when the dog catches the car.
But during the course of that time, having been involved with the reproductive rights movement, we were working very hard to understand the people that we call in the mushy middle, right? To move from, when I started at NARAL, Pro-Choice America, as a board member, 6 in 10 Americans supported Roe v. Wade. It's now 8 in 10 Americans. And as we've seen, that number is deepening. But I'll tell you the number on here that I find fascinating is who do you trust more? That 42%. Because guess what? That's also the case in Virginia, that the voters trust Democrats over Republicans on this issue. So when this issue is front and center, it looks like Democrats.
Why isn't that margin larger, though? Why isn't that margin larger, though, given the
It's an early.
The rest of these
For those who aren't seeing it, it's 49% Democratic Party, 42% for the Republican Party. When the question is asked, who do you trust more to handle abortion?
Look, as a card-carrying centrist, I always object to the phrase "the mushy middle." It's demeaning, but particularly on abortion, I want to make a strong case here. The old Clintonian formation, which was safe, legal, and rare, between a woman, her doctor, her family, and her God, turns out to have been right in terms of a supermajority of American support. This is not one of many issues in which we should not have maximalist opinions driving the decision. And what I think most Americans understood was this was kind of rammed through the Supreme Court. All of a sudden, folks who had been saying for a long time it was states' rights, all of a sudden Congress started pushing a national abortion ban, contradicting that argument. And people are saying, well, you took away a freedom
that had been in place for 50 years. It's a complex personal issue, but this is some trying to find a middle ground and preserving a right that had been taken away. And whether Republicans have any future in this issue, I guess that's what Nikki Haley and Glenn Youngkin are trying to carve out. But there's no question, if these polls are right, Republicans remain on the back foot. This will be the 7th election in which they have been repudiated on this issue
That's
since
an important point. If these polls, Gloria, are right, it's a continuation of what we've seen ever since Roe v. Wade.
Right. Look, I mean, it's exactly the same almost. If these are early, but the evidence is here that people feel very strongly about this, and you know, maybe the reason the Republicans haven't been able to find a way to get around it is that people are angry about it, and it's not just women; it's women and men. And they are the dog that caught the bus, right? Because there was no plan B, unless you were listening to Mike Pence, you know, who said you have to outlaw it federally, et cetera. That's not going to fly. So what do Republicans do now? Donald Trump, we've heard him try and make like a real estate deal, like, okay, well, maybe 15 weeks will be okay. But, you know, this is an emotional issue and you can't treat it like any other issue. So
yeah, a lot of them are not staking out clear positions on this.
No, they're not.
There's a multiplicity of things. I mean, what Republicans said always was that what's happening now, federalism, is actually what the solution should be. Just let it go back to the states. Let Ohio codify their constitution, like Kansas Pence's law. It just turns out that the party was just too fractured, and too many fragments of it had much more extreme views, and those are ascendant.
Let me just remind everyone, these are the early exit polls, not the final numbers by any means. They will be coming up fairly soon. We'll see what those final numbers are. So what might today's elections tell us about 2024? We'll be back with our panel in just a moment. Back to our special coverage of Election Day in America. Tonight's state and local races will not only determine which political party will have control in the coming years, but it will also serve as tea leaves for 2024. President Biden and Donald Trump likely watching these contests very, very closely tonight. And let's talk a little bit, Gloria. If Democrats have a big night tonight, I assume that this issue of abortion rights will presumably help them looking ahead.
Yeah, I think this issue of abortion rights is the wind at their back, and it could be in a bunch of races. I think the question that's interesting to me is, could somebody like Governor Beshear in Kentucky, who's a popular Democrat in a state where Joe Biden is unpopular, can he win? Can he manage to win and override those sort of negative coattails, right? And that is something that the White House will be looking at also, because, you know, if you're popular, does it matter if the president is unpopular? That's something they've got to really be considering.
I don't even know if he has mentioned President Biden's name at all while he's been campaigning. It's not like they've appeared together. I mean, he has definitely tried to focus on just Kentucky and not at all focusing, trying to bring the president and the Democratic national politics.
Major super PAC outside independent expenditure groups have spent loads of money on attack ads against Beshear, tying him to Biden in favor of Daniel Cameron. That's just how much of a weight he has around his neck.
But Beshear already defied political gravity once, right? I mean, he beat a Republican who was an unpopular incumbent governor in the middle of Trump's term. He comes, you know, his father had previously been governor, so there's a certain brand name that makes him more of a local brand rather than a national political brand. But I'd say this race is one of the most fascinating ones to watch, because both these candidates are extraordinarily talented. Whoever wins, I think, will be a national figure. Because for Beshear, if he wins re-election in Kentucky, a state that Donald Trump won twice by, you know, more than 20 points, he will show that there is a red state Democrat who connects with rural voters. That's a very big deal. If Daniel Cameron wins, he will not only be the first black Republican governor in Kentucky's history, but the first black Republican governor since Reconstruction. And that will be of national resonance as well.
Yeah, I agree it's going to be really interesting. Kentucky's also just what political scientists call weird.
Technical term.
I don't like to bring up all the jargon, but you know, Kentucky wasn't really a southern state. It's kind of demographically a Midwestern state, but Kentuckians consider themselves southern.
It's still a border state.
It's a strange place. It's Appalachian, which again is kind of strange, and and it's the one state where you have a McConnell machine and a Trump machine coexisting in a very weird way.
Bluegrass and bourbon.
And so you got this guy running on Kentucky first, not mentioning Joe Biden. If Bashir wins, I don't know that Biden gets to say, oh, this speaks well of my chances in 2024. I just think it's just this weird thing going on over there. That was interesting, but it's not like Biden's going to have any chances of winning Kentucky or any state remotely like it.
No, but it shows that someone can win without him. Right?
Yeah.
And that's important for them to know since he's not exactly popular right now.
Yeah, he'd be a great substitute for Biden's running mate.
I think we should give Bashir a little bit of credit. He's 60% popularity. He's also running on a very strong record. I mean, he has, from what I understand, stayed very close to the electorate, visits rural Kentucky very frequently and often, and has really, people feel like he's really delivered. So the pathway in a red state is also, you have to stay connected to your voters. They've got to see you out and about and know that you are working for them, and keep your race focused on those issues.
But my question is also, when you look at a state like Virginia, where every legislator is up for re-election, as we know, because of how they changed the redistricting and it pits some people in the same party against one another. When you look at how that has been run and how Youngkin has instructed people to talk about abortion politics, that 15-week limit that he is seeking, how does that factor into, if that is successful, if that does work for Republicans, what people look at compared to how Governor Youngkin has helped run that and how a former President Trump plays a role in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, Virginia is really interesting because both parties have put real resources behind finding candidates who are more moderate, more sort of in the middle, electable. The Democrats put up a bunch of guys who have law enforcement or military background. Youngkin tried to find a whole bunch of mini-me's who can sort of not scare suburban voters in Northern Virginia. And, I mean, for the passionate centrist here, the future kind of lies in those kind of moving the goalposts closer towards the center of American politics. And so it'll be interesting to read. I don't know that you can read, the tea leaves are going to be all that interesting for 2024. You're going to have some House delegates who are going to get elected with 20,000, 30,000 people voting, and that's just not necessarily...
But what it does say about 2024, Jonah, and I think for the Republican side, is if Youngkin takes the House and the Senate, this is seen as a massive victory for him.
Yeah.
Sure.
And that is a win for Republicans who are looking for somebody other than Donald Trump.
Sure.
Even if he doesn't get him, right? Even if he's missed these filing deadlines, I think there is still a dream out there, particularly in the donor class on the Republican side, that Youngkin jumps in this thing.
Candles nightly.
They are. And regardless of how realistic that is, what it does is reflect that there really is still a significant portion of the Republican Party that hopes for something other than Donald Trump for the nomination. And so this will give steam, this will put wind in those sails.
But it's interesting because Donald Trump has been talking a little bit about what Youngkin's been talking about, right? A compromise of 15 weeks. Now, he's not talking about it in the same way that Youngkin is, but if I were looking at that and I were Donald Trump, I'd be saying, oh, yeah, well, maybe that's a good idea. Yeah, maybe I'll do that. Yeah. And if I'd be looking at that and I were Joe Biden, I'd say, well, yeah, that was smart of Youngkin to do that. He'd be a tough competitor. For me.
Thankfully, the Republican rules will make it hard for Youngkin, as I understand it, to get into the race, although there is a lot of hoping and praying. Look, I think but to your point, Youngkin has put a lot of his personal credibility on the line in this race. Many of the ads he ran were actually not about the candidates, they were about him. Right. So he really tied those candidates to him and his agenda. So just as it could play very well for him, the flip side is we could see his decline afterwards if they lose.
Yeah. Let me ask you, what does it say to you that we didn't see the incumbent president out there on the campaign trail for some of these Democratic candidates?
It says those Democratic candidates didn't want the incumbent president on the campaign trail. I will say that
we
saw
see Trump out there on the campaign trail much either.
No, but it's when primaries, of course, Republicans desperately wanted that endorsement. He's tied up in court. We saw that though. Remember, even in Obama's first term, a lot of Democratic candidates not wanting to be seen with him in 2009, 2010, 2011. And so, look, I do think all politics is local. Yes, I'll invoke Tip O'Neill. But if you look statistically, the Virginia State House races do seem to be predictive. And the argument Youngkin's making has been interesting. He's been saying, look, elect Republicans so I can have people in the State House who will work with me, not against me. In a way, it's an argument for functional government.
All right, that's 2 Tip O'Neill references.
Yep.
We'll mark that
Those
down
coming
on
at
our
home.
whiteboard. We'll keep counting them all night long as we wait for these polls to close. The big question right now is still, will a right to an abortion become part of the Constitution in Ohio? The Republican governor of that state is urging voters not to vote for that measure. He is here live next to explain why he thinks it goes too far. Ohio is now the 7th state where voters have had the chance to weigh in directly on the issue of abortion rights after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. In all of the 6 previous states, both red and blue, voters have chosen to protect a woman's right to get an abortion. I'm joined now by the governor of Ohio, Republican Mike DeWine. Governor, thank you for being here. This issue on the ballot tonight is called Issue 1. It's about abortion rights. Do you believe it's going to pass or is it going to fail?
Well, I really don't know. I saw what your exit questions were, and I watched you. But I'll prefer to wait until we see what actually comes in. What I do know is that Issue 1 just goes much too far. It allows abortion at any point in the pregnancy, and that's, if you break down where people are. The majority of people in Ohio, if you ask them, do you believe abortion should be able to occur late into the term, most of them are going to say no. So this goes much further than where I think most Ohioans are. It also threatens. Sure, go ahead.
It also threatens what?
No, I said it threatens the parental consent law in Ohio. Ultimately, this will be decided by a court, but parental consent law, it threatens. Which basically requires a parent to be involved if a minor is making this very important decision.
Well, let me start with your first point, because you're saying it goes too far, that it would allow these late-term abortions. Of course, as you know as well as I do, only about 1% of abortions in the U.S., according to the CDC, happen after 21 weeks. But the language that's actually in this amendment, it's pretty short and straightforward. It says abortion may be prohibited after fetal viability, which, as you know, is generally determined to be around 23 to 24 weeks. So it does say you can prohibit it.
Look, we've talked to constitutional scholars. There's an exception to that, which you have to also know if you're looking at. And the exception says for the health of the mother. Health of the mother has been defined extremely broadly by the United States Supreme Court in an abortion case. And so the exception really takes over everything. And so it would allow an abortion right up until the time of birth. And look, we have experience with this in Ohio. We have a guy by the name of Martin Haskell who developed this partial birth abortion. He's the one who developed it. He basically deliver the baby, kill the baby, deliver it partially away, kill the baby, and then deliver the rest of the baby. We outlawed that in Ohio. We outlawed it nationally for any case involving interstate commerce. But that would certainly be overturned, or very likely be overturned if this constitutional amendment was passed.
You're talking about the health of the mother being broadly determined. I mean, that's a determination that's made by a doctor who they have a duty to follow medical science, do they not?
It's made by the person at the Planned Parenthood clinic who performs abortion after abortion every single day.
Which is a doctor.
So that person is making that decision. If you just let me finish, that person is making that decision. And they're the person who, then there's no, under there's absolutely no appeal. If you look at the language in this constitutional amendment, the state may not interfere directly, indirectly, and it goes on, and then it has this huge exception for the health of the mother. And look at the Supreme Court decision that was handed down where they defined health of the mother. They define it as, it could be a question of poverty. It could be a question of, I have too many children. It could be any number of different things. That's what the United States Supreme Court said. And so in all likelihood, that's what we will end up with in Ohio.
But Governor, this amendment is short. It's only about 200 words. It doesn't say anything about finances in it. And it also doesn't say anything about parental consent, something that you just said would be threatened. That the Republican Attorney General in your state said nothing about parental consent is mentioned in this amendment. I mean, you can read it. It's quite quite short.
Well, there's no doubt there's nothing mentioned about parental consent. I just explained it. If you go back, if you look at the language in the amendment, it talks about an individual. Look, these are very smart ACLU lawyers who wrote this. They knew exactly what they were doing. If they wanted to say only an adult and not a child, they would have used the word woman. They didn't. They used the word an individual. So it's clear what they were trying to do. This is a right for an individual, and it's very clear that a court very well could come to the conclusion that a child, has that individual right, and this is a constitutional amendment. This is not just a law. This is a constitutional amendment. That constitutional amendment will trump any law that we have on the books if they're in direct conflict with each other.
But Governor, I got to push back on what you said about the finances being considered when a doctor is considering the health of a mother who is considering having an abortion here. Can you name one instance where that has ever happened?
Look, all I know is what the United States Supreme Court said. And if you tell me you've read the same decision, and you know it's an extremely broad. Look, even people
but has this
who
ever
are
been
pro-choice
happened? Has
on
that
this
ever
issue,
happened where someone got an
Can I
abortion
finish?
because they were citing
You
their
won't let
own
me
finances,
finish.
Governor?
You will not let me finish. Look, the Supreme Court of the United States has defined this extremely broadly. And so it's very, very clear that even people who are pro-choice, who are in favor of issue one, many of them will admit, yes, this will allow an abortion at any time.
Governor, my last question, if this amendment does what you say it does, if it goes too far and you don't believe that voters should vote for it, why not just have the language of the amendment actually on the ballot? Because it's not actually on there. Instead, it's a summary from your Republican Secretary of State when the amendment itself is quite brief and straightforward about what it does do.
Look, everybody's had an opportunity to look at this. The thousands of these, hundreds of thousands of these copies have been made of this. People have had a chance to look at it. It's not a question of the language. It's a question of understanding with legal experts how this is going to be likely interpreted by courts in the future.
Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, we'll see what the voters decide tonight. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
And we're going to get reaction to that and much more with our panel. And we're also waiting for some new exit polls as our Election Day coverage continues. Right now, we're getting new exit polls in from Ohio. Let's go to CNN's political director, David Chalian. He has these brand new numbers. David, so what are we hearing about who's fired up? Who fired up the voters more in Ohio?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, remember, these are preliminary exit poll numbers. They could shift over the night as we get more information. And it's a survey of voters who voted both today in person as well as those who voted before Election Day, either by mail or at an early voting site. But we wanted to look at the different coalitions. So look first, we asked folks, this is among the folks who voted yes on issue one, the pro-abortion rights supporters in Ohio today. 63% of those that voted yes are angry about the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And 48%, you see here, of those say that abortion should be legal in all cases. That's the plurality position there. Now contrast that, Wolf, with those who voted no. These are the anti-abortion rights folks, the pro-life supporters who voted no on the issue today in Ohio. 39% feel enthusiastic about the overturning of Roe, Wolf, but that does not compare to that 63% who felt angry on the other side. And in terms of whether or not abortion should be illegal in most cases, you see 56% of those who voted no on this issue today in Ohio say that abortion should be illegal in most cases. It's just 24% who say that it should be illegal in all cases. So you see that the passion, the anger, the energy, that's on the side of the people voting yes today, the pro-abortion rights voters in Ohio, Wolf.
Interesting numbers indeed. David Chalian, thank you very much.
And Karen, just to I want to make sure it's clear for everyone because this is confusing given we covered an issue 1 in Ohio not that long ago.
Yeah.
The vote no on that was to raise the threshold of what it would require to add something to Ohio's constitution.
Correct.
Voting in the affirmative here is a vote for yes for abortion rights. A vote no is a vote against adding and enshrining abortion rights into the Constitution.
Correct.
What stands out to you from these numbers?
I think what stands out to me is something we've been talking about tonight, which is the passion and the anger and the frustration is still very hot. And people have not, and early on after Roe v. Wade was struck down, I think people thought, well, women will just, they'll be okay. They'll be worried about their pocketbooks. Instead, again, it's about taking away a fundamental right, and particularly with younger voters who see this as an issue of freedom and bodily autonomy. I'll be interested to see the breakdown of who turned out in terms of the demographics, because again, young voters have been very motivated on this issue.
Yeah, and these are just early numbers. We'll continue to monitor them. The first polls are about to close in just a few moments. Some of the final predictions from our great political minds, that's next.
The first polls are closing in just a matter of a few minutes. Let's get back to our panel. And I want to ask everyone, Gloria, starting with you, what's the big thing you're looking forward to seeing tonight?
Well, obviously, the one thing we're all looking for is how potent an issue abortion still is after Dobbs. We've spent a lot of time talking about that. But I'm also going to look to see how strong the power of incumbency is. When you look in the state of Kentucky, Andy Beshear, popular Democrat, in a ruby red state, can he survive? Can Glenn Youngkin do, even though he's not on the ballot, can he do what he wants to do, which is take credit for turning the legislature Republican? I think that's sort of an interesting side issue to all of this, which is how much of an advantage do incumbents have? And that goes also in the state of Mississippi, where there's apparently a race, and Tate Reeves has some problems, but he's the incumbent. So we'll see.
What's the big thing you're watching for?
I mean, look, Tate Reeves has got more than a few problems. But what I'm looking for is to see whether or not these two Democratic governors in the Deep South, one incumbent, one challenger, Brandon Presley, can pull it off. Because that is a really interesting sign about how our politics are actually more interesting and complex than they seem to be when we do everything from a red state versus blue state predetermined lens. So that's something to look for. The other thing is, look, these elections are about more than just about abortion. My wife's correcting me. That's fair enough.
One thing.
But
benefit of having a spouse at the table.
That's true. But if abortion, if this exit polls are indicative of what's happening in Ohio, it's going to be, the third or fourth deep red state that has rejected attempts to cramp down on abortion rights. And I wonder if that, given that Donald Trump created this Supreme Court that delivered that, if that's bad news for him going forward. Not with strength, but a profound weakness, given his sort of trying attempts to sort of make things more.
You did two things. You're supposed to do one thing.
You're right.
Now I'm doing
Fair
two.
enough.
I'm doing them fast.
Okay,
First,
good.
I want to look at, I'm actually very curious to see how Glenn Youngkin does, if he's able to deliver this win, and then how that impacts the Republican field and the Republican nomination. The second thing I'm looking for is something none of us have talked about, and it's so unsexy, but it's so important for 2024. I'm looking at how quickly and efficiently and how much integrity these elections and the process of counting these ballots has. If there are crickets from all of these states that have administered fair elections with a high degree of confidence, we have had a merciful recess from the MAGA crowd that wants to instill doubt in our ability to administer free and fair elections.
Karen and Jonah, I wonder what you made. I mean, you just heard the Ohio governor's closing message on a major issue in his state, one of the biggest issues that people are watching tonight. I wonder what you made of that.
Yeah, so I actually agree with DeWine, and I think you're all wrong in your rejection of his argument. I think immediately if this thing passes, it's going to go to courts. They're going to challenge every single restriction on abortion in the state, and it's going to be a court challenge for a very long time. People need to remember, look, I think the abortion stuff, again, I'm so skeptical of these exit polls, so skeptical. But if they are right, it's going to pass. And but you got to remember, Ohio is a state that Trump won by, 8? And DeWine won by 25. This idea that all of the wind is on the back on liberals because of this one singular abortion issue, I think belies the fact that our politics are a lot more complicated than they may seem.
So you're skeptical that it is powerful of a force continuing in every race?
No, I think it's a really powerful force. I don't think
in every race.
I don't think we're going to learn how Joe Biden is going to beat Donald Trump from these elections. I think this stuff is going to be forgotten in 10 days. Donald Trump is going to start, talking in court like an escaped monkey from a cocaine study, and we'll all forget about all of this stuff.
So I'm looking at the demographics of what the breakdown of the turnout is in all of these places. What are black voters doing? What are Latino voters doing? What are suburban white women doing? I think that's and what are young voters doing? Well, if there's a level of enthusiasm, that's going to tell us a lot about whether or not what we have to do to keep them turning back out in 2024. How about that? That was less than a minute. One thing, John. One.
The data collection in this race is going to be really important, but that's just not visible.
Yeah.
We're all going to be watching this very closely. Caitlin, a pleasure being with you. Thank you very much.
Of course, Wolf, always good to be by your side.
And that's it for us tonight. Keep it right here for continuing live coverage throughout the night as the results come in. America's Choice, Election Night in America with Jake Tapper and Aaron Burnett begins in just a moment.